Does your book look like a lot of other books? You know, page after page of boring black type against a white background. What could be more boring? Well, that's the way books are done today. They've been done that way for many, many years, but they don't have to be done that way. Books can be beautiful. And if books are beautiful, people will read them, and that will reflect positively on you. When you watch this video, you'll find out why books look so bad today and how you can make your book stand out. Hi, I'm Dan Janelle, the author of more than a dozen books, including Write Your Book in a Flash. I'm a book strategist, and I can help you write your book as a ghostwriter, book coach, or developmental editor. Now, let's get started.
Typography, book typography is this wonderful lost art. It's like watchmaking. And we've made incredible sacrifices to mass production because remember, your big publisher, your Random House, Random Penguin, whoever, the big publishers, they're sending books to bookstores and they're sending thousands of books. The risk associated with that is amazing. They're going to print books. They're going to do 90 to 120 books every quarter. They're going to ship them out to bookstores by the boxcar load. And maybe they send out 3,000 at a time. Well, that's great. They sell 1,000 books and the author is happy. And then 2,000 books at the end of the 90-day rotation, 2,000 books are being returned. And they don't return them because it's too expensive. They tear the covers off. They send the covers back to the publisher to prove that the book was destroyed, and everything else goes to the recycler or the pulp mill or whatever. So big publishers are smart. They have made the type tiny and the margins thin and the line spacing tight because they can save 30 or 40 or 50 pages per book multiplied by this large press run on, have you ever noticed how light books are? I mean, I don't know, they inject this paper with helium or something, but for me, it's like trying to read the phone book. And I see so many people imitating what's happening with mass production. But with print on demand, where we're manufacturing one book at a time, we've got amazing opportunities to kind of look back to where printing was an art form and use our digital tools to emulate what was done with hot metal type. And if you've forgotten about that, make a trip to a bookstore, look at the books, and then afterward, go to an antique store and pick up a book from the 1910s or 20s that was printed with hot metal type on a Linotype machine or a standard printing press, and open it up and it just screams, "Read me, I'm beautiful." That's gone today because of mass production. So let's take a look at old school typography, because we can even do certain things better because we've got digital tools. We can do things that the old hot metal typesetters couldn't do. Typeface selection is very important. And you'll notice on the screen, I've got Once Upon a Time, sulfuric acid and sodium bicarbonate. We don't want a very lyrical typeface for that. We have different typefaces for different function, even computer code. So understanding typography and choosing the right typeface can really make a difference. Even if the reader never notices it, whether we use a lyrical typeface or a serious typeface or a technical typeface, it's setting a tone and it affects them in powerful subconscious ways. Just a glimpse of that. Here are 4 characters, and by the way, they're all 250 point type, and notice that they are all different heights. So just choosing the right point size may not harmonize things. We have to adjust things up and down. On the right, we've got the 2 ones on the right are both serif typefaces. They're called bracketed serifs. And serifs are those little lines on the ends of the stroke, on the bottom and on the ends. Notice the slab serif has slab serifs. It's got rectangular serifs. And the one on the left is a sans serif, has no serifs at all, like Helvetica or Arial, which is actually a ripoff of Helvetica, but that's a different story. So lots of different typefaces and type styles. And if we set the book in the wrong typeface, we're going to fail to convey the meaning, the tone. There's a lot that goes into this. Another thing, and I know this is difficult to see, but here are the characters in two different typefaces. On the left, we have Georgia, which is a beautiful typeface, and it contains a finite number of characters. On the right, we've got Agmenta Pro, which is a typeface that's designed for book production. And we have all of these extra additional characters. So when you use a typeface that's designed for book design, you're not going to go, oh, gee, I have to borrow the pound sign or the euro sign from another typeface. What are some of the differences that we find between standard digital typefaces and typefaces that are really full-featured for book design? One is this idea of ligatures. You've seen this a million times and never noticed it. On the left, we have just type FI. And that dot is either balanced between the two characters, or it may even collide with the end of the F. So smart software substitutes an FI ligature, and the ball of the F is right over the top of the I, and it just substitutes in there. And we have so many FIs and FLs and things, and they make the reading much smoother. A lot of standard typefaces don't have these ligatures, but they really just smooth out the reading experience, and you'll never notice them because you'll read right through them, but they make a difference. Talking about typefaces that have different options, notice, start on the right. The S is different in every example. The top one is just your standard cursive S. On the second example, the S has a swoosh on it, which you can use on the end of the word, or we can use the standard coiled snake S. There's two different Ks. There's two different capital Rs. Notice the Y with and without the swoosh. Note the capital T, the P with the loop. And so when you're setting up a title for a book or something like that, to have that much control over the typography, is the reader going to stop and say, oh, look, they used the Y with a swoosh on it? No, they're probably not, but it all contributes to the art of the book. And I think at the end of the day, creating something where we're working with typefaces that have the options built in, it creates a better experience. Now, here are two pages. The one on the left, it's the same type. The one on the left is imitating the way a trade book looks. The type is packed together and everything's just, the margins are standard all around. And then we're using classic margins on the right-hand side. The type is opened up. It's easier to read. And books were done this way since the time of Gutenberg until we hit this mass production wall. And even that little place to put your thumb without covering the text on the right-hand side. And you've probably heard of the rule of thirds in photography and design. So this is kind of thirds of thirds. And if you break the page up into a grid of ninths and position everything in terms of thirds, you can see where this layout comes from. And again, this was developed in the 1400s for the Gutenberg Bible. This is old classic print design, but we get harmonies that we get proportions that just harmonize with the page, and they create an experience for the reader. And I know I'm getting a little bit woo-woo here because I can't quantify this scientifically, but we have things like the golden mean and the golden ratio and the rule of thirds. And these things have been staples of architecture and design for many, many years. And yet we run up against the mass production design and we have to sacrifice all of this stuff to pack more text onto the page. Another one you'll see done typically with a word processor or with digital tools is where someone clicks, make the first character a drop cap or an initial cap. And yet, if you think about what I've done here, the first word is some, not ohm. And if I just set the character in a white rectangle and move the type around, I don't get that experience. And if I make the rectangle smaller, God knows what a sport hole is. So just being able to adjust the drop cap, the initial cap to fit the text, it takes a little bit more time, but this is something a capable book typographer is going to do. Can you see the problem with this particular page? This is what happens when you typeset with a word processor instead of a typesetting program. And I'll show you the problem. It's right here. And this is called a river. When we justify text, we end up very often with spacing that lines up in uncomfortable ways, and it creates these rivers of white space through the type. And if we use a typesetting program like Adobe InDesign or Quark Express, or the big competitor that's coming up and costs very little money is Affinity Publisher. I think it costs $75 or $50 for a lifetime subscription. It's not quite as powerful, but it's getting there. And some things that we can do. So this is just standard type, and it's justified type, because usually we fully justify type in a book. Can you see how all of these hyphens, when we've got 2 or more hyphens on consecutive lines, it's called a ladder. And can you see how they make that kind of visual scoop out of the side of the text box? Well, we can adjust that first by using hanging punctuation, something that would have been difficult for a traditional printer to do. And by letting those quotation marks and periods and hyphens hang off the side, hang outside the text box, visually we get a nice straight line on both sides. And part of working, there are so many adjustments we can make to the hyphenation, to the letter spacing, to the way the computer adjusts the consecutive lines. What you're looking at here is the original type, and overlaid on top of it in color is the adjusted type. We've got incredible tools for just adjusting justified type. And you're not going to get that in a word processor. A word processor, typesetting a book in Microsoft Word is really kind of a travesty. Yes, you can make it work if you're on a budget, but you're not going to get these fine adjustments that make the type elegant and legible and readable. So coming back to the whole presentation at the beginning, and this speaks to that question on trends, suit the book to the author's purpose. Are they trying to appeal to a speaking audience? Are they working in a certain industry? Are they very artistic and whimsical? Or are they very rigid and scientific and fact-based? Suit the cover to the author's purpose, and also understand where it is that they're going to be selling the book, because it's not going to be in a bookstore. Remember that word processors are great for Word. If you're like me, you have a love-hate relationship with Microsoft Word because it always tries to think for you, but track changes is magnificent and it's great. But whenever someone sends me a manuscript that they've already set up as 5.5 by 8.5 with margins, or I just cringe. Just work as 8.5 by 11, make your manuscript go. Why imitate mass production? Because it's done nothing but erode book design, both for covers and for book interiors. And get inspired by classic print design. There are so many wonderful books on graphic design and book typography. If you buy them and just thumb through them. Also for covers, Chip Kidd is a wonderful book cover designer, and I think he designs for Penguin, but there are books of his stuff. Look at great design, no matter what, whether you're designing the interior or the exterior. Go to an antique store, buy a few books. Go to a bookstore, buy a few books about cover design. Buy some books about, I love the Blue Note album cover art books. They're great for your coffee table and they're loaded with inspiration. Ultimately, we need to serve our writer and then we need to serve our reader. Can we give them the best possible experience and a book that feels like they've received something special? And that's what I got.
Dave, thank you very much. That was excellent. That was a lot of hands clapping here. Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Let me switch over.
Sure. Let me ask you a question or two that I have, and we'll open up to people as well. I've noticed that when I pick up a self-published book, many times I can tell it is a self-published book It just does not have the same look and feel and design. And I can't tell what it is, but I just know it. And I'm wondering two questions here. Do the average people know it? Because after all, many people listen to this episode want to write a book that increases their professionalism and their credibility. And if a book doesn't have the right design, it can actually take away from that credibility. And two, what are some of the classic mistakes that self-publishers make that make their books look amateurish? If there are any other examples beyond what you've already talked about with the ladders and those other pieces. So two questions in one.
I think that people conflate self-publishing with self-designing. And if you're gonna do anything, do it right. You know, when my toilet breaks, I hire a plumber. I could probably get in there and start unbolting things and changing gaskets, but I'm not very good at that. I'm not trained to do that. When I need, and look, I've edited many books, but when I'm ready to publish a book, I work with a professional editor. It's like being your own lawyer to edit your own book. So I think this idea that self-publishing is something like, oh, I'm going to do this for free. Look, if you don't want to pay for typesetting, then release an ebook. There's ways around it. But I mean, the idea that I've literally seen people try to design a cover in PowerPoint. And how many hours do you spend creating a book? Hundreds, thousands of hours between the writing and the editing, and to wrap that book in fish paper when you're done is a travesty. I understand designers, design typesetting, it's not cheap, but what's your book worth? And again, do you have a way to sell it? Do you have an audience? Do you have a following? And look, I did my 3 novels, I did my memoir, and even at my cost, I'll never pay for those. I'll never recover the money for them, but God, I'm glad I did it. I mean, writing your memoir is cathartic. Writing your novels is creative, and there's a place for art in this world, and art doesn't necessarily pay for itself.
If you want to write your book in a flash, be sure to check out the other videos we have on our YouTube channel.